Namaste. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday night Anamkara meditation program. With all my heart, with all my love, I welcome you to our program this evening. Great to be able to get together with you. And these times, these challenging times in the world and in our lives, individually and collectively, well, they spur us to go deeper. They are, as practitioners, as yogis, as seekers, however you think of yourself, challenging times, well, we make use of that to go deeper and to strengthen practice. And that's what we do here when we get together. We get together and do practice together. And together is really because we're in the same unified field of consciousness. Oh, somebody might be in Bali, somebody might be in another part of the country, but we're all together in this field of consciousness. The field of consciousness that is the divine, that is what gives us the experience of the divine embrace. When we move out of being solely identified with mind and body and begin to know this field of luminous consciousness that's suffused with that loving compassion, that all-embracing loving compassion. So the practices empower us to go more deeply into that experience. And so when things are challenging, we want to deepen our practice, use it as a time to say, oh, this is what we can do. We can go deeper. As I was thinking about that, it brought up an experience when I was a little kid. And it was one of the first times I went to the beach in our locale, Jones Beach, right on the ocean. And I was, a little kid, 4 years old or something, and went to the beach, and these, huge ocean waves coming in, and I'd be getting bowled over, and I tried standing sideways. I tried to face them and just power through it, and I just kept getting knocked over. And then my mom came over and said, oh, honey, here's what you do. As soon as you see the wave come, dive under it. Dive. She says, just dive, you'll see what happens. And sure enough, the next wave came, I dove, and I just came out standing the other side. Another wave, and then it became, oh, I can just dive under and through. That's what we do in practice. We dive deeper, we go under, we go through. So we make use of the practices in order to do that, in order to deepen our experience, deepen our understanding, to help us deconstruct what's going on in this world. Because partly what happens for the mind, it gets confused, it gets baffled, and that increases suffering and distress. So we get clearer through our contemplations, we get deeper in our meditative practice. We see the practices that hold us throughout the day, whether it's practices of remembering, using mantra, using things that bring us back to the truth of who we are and this divine reality that we inhabit. However distorted it might be by people who are just flailing about in ignorance and creating suffering for all beings on this planet. But we still to see that clearly and be able to see, oh, even in the midst of that, I can know the infinite. I can know the divine as myself and all that is. And we're not alone in that. I mean, this has been the course of mystics and practitioners for thousands of years. Buddha, even though he lived in the lap of luxury growing up as a prince, renounced it all and entered the field of profound suffering and extreme asceticism. And you see the same kind of thing that yogis, sages, saints, monastics have done over and over again. Householder sadhana is what we live in the world. Well, it gives us ample opportunity to try and dive under the waves of suffering and ignorance that are roiling about us, and that we have to go deeper to get free of it, to get to the place of calm and steadiness, that then it can inform our ability to then stand and walk the highest into the world, to both relieve and diminish the suffering for ourselves, but also to relieve and diminish the suffering for all beings. So this is what we're empowered to do through the practices. So one of the things I wanted to touch on was actually something that Patanjali, the great yogic sage. And he, well, it varies historically when he's said to have lived, but the teachings that he codified went back to the time of Buddha. And so back, 500 years before this common era, and Buddha was practicing, he studied Samkhya. That was the philosophy that the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras then codified and passed on. So Buddha was very familiar with these kinds of teachings and these kinds of practices. And we can see in the Buddhist tradition how they informed that practice. We also see how these same practices informed the evolution of yogic practice and the tantric practices in the East, and how congruent they are with mystics and sages and saints across traditions, because he was just giving words to insights that we see from mystics, very much the same across traditions. So when we're dealing with the troubles in the world and everything, really what we're dealing with is what's going on in our mind. How are these things impacting our consciousness? What are they doing to our state moment by moment? Because as a practitioner, as a seeker, as a sadhu, however we might think of ourselves, a yogi or yogini, what we get practical about is, our state. What do we do to sustain our best state, to deepen that state, to expand that state, to be able to be steady in that state regardless of what's coming along? And that's why yogis did, even after being able to touch into the unitive state, they would challenge themselves with ascetic practices, with going into the field of suffering, to be able to stay steady and then pass that on to others. So these challenges are, again, a call to deepen our practice and become more and more steady with that. So Patanjali talked about, so what are the things that interfere with our state, that negatively affect us? And so Patanjali writes in these Yoga Sutras, and this is one of my favorite, very accessible translations of the Yoga Sutras, How to Know God, the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And it was a translation that was done by Swami Prabhavananda and Christopher Isherwood back in the 50s. So Patanjali's writing, and he says, sickness, mental laziness, doubt, lack of enthusiasm, sloth, craving for sense pleasures, false perception, despair caused by failure to concentrate, and unsteadiness in concentration. These distractions are the obstacles to knowledge, to true knowing the truth of who we are, knowing the reality of the living presence of the divine as our own self moment by moment. Because that's the goal. That's the goal of yoga, to be united with that. So he says these distractions are accompanied by grief, despondency, trembling of the body, and irregular breathing. So they have an impact on both our mind and our emotional states, as well as what's going on physically. And now we have a raft of research, and part of my background in the field of biofeedback and neurofeedback really went into, well, what is the impact of stress on the body, how it changes our breathing, our heart rate, and how we can make use of yogic practices to really recenter, really undo the reactivity of the mind and the nervous system and how it's negatively impacting the body and our states. Now Patanjali goes on and says they can be removed by the practice of concentration upon a single truth. So concentration as a practice is really foundational. Buddha, adopting this, made concentration on sensory experience from mindfulness, mindfulness of the breath, mindfulness of sound, mindfulness of taste, mindfulness of vision. You can use even just one sensory domain as a concentration. But also, we make use of concentration on mantra. So mantra is a royal path to alleviating the suffering of the mind and transforming it, because mantra, unlike other kinds of focusing devices, mantra is imbued with the power of consciousness that is really coming from beyond the mind. So if we really fully enter the throb of the infinite that we call mantra, then we can be absorbed back into the infinitude of being that is our true nature. So that's why in so many traditions, the use of mantra, or we might call it sacred sound, a sacred teaching in a word or two, that helps us draw back and enter that state. Because the truth is, practices, and whatever number of practices that we might do out of various spiritual traditions, but especially the Eastern traditions, we see it, they are recognized as they were born of the divine. They weren't mind-born. So when you start to regulate the breath, and the yogis discovered as they went into deeper states of meditation and got free of the mind and how it was disturbing the body and making the breath irregular, the breath would calm and deepen. It would become slow and diaphragmatic. Well, they realized that was both a reflection of the shift in state, both mental and physical, but it also offered a practice. Because then, rather than waiting till we got into that state, we could practice the slowing and deepening of the breath and see how it then transforms the body. And now we have, again, lots of research showing how it affects the vagus nerve, the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems that have to do with reactivity. It even changes what's going on in the brain, changes everything from brain chemistry to what areas of the brain are functioning in the moment. So simple breathing and slowing and deepening of the breath, what developed as a yogic practice called pranayama, well, that was rooted in this discovery that, when we shift our state, it has this calming, transformative impact on the body, the brain, the mind. All these things start to come together. So we start to see that. So when we get into, exploring the depths of practice and applying them, these are what we can make use of so that those waves that keep coming at us from the world, these are the ways we can dive under those waves and come out the other side and stand steady in the truth of who we are, the truth of what this world is. That's what the practices empower us to do, free ourselves and others from suffering. Patanjali goes on to say, undisturbed calmness of mind is attained by cultivating friendliness toward the happy, compassion for the unhappy, delight in the virtuous, and indifference toward the wicked. So he goes on, now he's expanding. He's not saying yoga is just about physiological internal processes, and they certainly are. That's the part of the root of their power, is that consciousness can impact those more gross, concrete levels of the operation of mind, brain, body. Now he's moving on and saying, well, we live in a social world. We live in interactions. And we want to know, what do we cultivate that's going to help us deal with others? Because the impact of others, well, it hits us and the bell of the mind rings. We can dampen how much that's ringing, and by cultivating these differences in attitudes. So he's saying undisturbed calmness of mind is attained by cultivating friendliness toward the happy. So for happy people, we join in their joy. We're friendly with that. We go, yes, how delightful. We're not jealous. We're not envious. We're not going, I wish I was that. No, we're cultivating. You see, we're stepping aside from what might be automatic other patterns of mind and saying, no, I'm going to cultivate friendliness. This appreciation for the joy of others. Later on, Patanjali is going to talk about that joy, true joy, well, that arises from the source that's within. Mm? It's not in the outer world. It's not in a person, an interaction. It's not in a pleasurable food. Mm? The source of joy is ananda, this innate, blissful, rapturous experience that Buddha talked about too as one of the four immeasurables, one of the foundational components or aspects, dimensions of pure being. That's who we are. So by cultivating friendliness towards joyousness and happiness in others and ourselves, we're aligning ourselves with this highest experience of the truth of who we are and what others are. And then he says, compassion for the unhappy. So compassion, another one of the four immeasurables that Buddha talked about this infinite field of luminous consciousness that is the truth of who we are when we're not just solely identified with mind and body. This boundless loving compassion that embraces all beings. Compassion, we understand the suffering of others. We understand and have compassion with that, in part because we're also aware of our own suffering and have experienced that, have explored what that's about, what gives rise to that suffering. So we understand it in others as well. We have this genuine compassion for others and want then to help them get free of suffering, because we want to free ourselves and all other beings from suffering. That is an expression of that boundless compassion. Then he says, and we delight in the virtuous. So being around, again, virtuous people, people who have that sense of steadiness of dharma, of understanding what's right, and will stand for that, even in the face of what's going on in the world, where it's sort of a-dharma, the unrighteousness that we see proliferating in government, in populations, and people being deluded by disinformation. So we see what's going on with that, and we want to see, but there's people who are standing there, and they're standing in that steady wisdom, and they're standing, holding the light of truth, even if it's just, the little wick, the flame of their own being. That's what they're holding up. That's what each one of us can do. We can hold that flame and hold that light aloft, because there's other people looking around in the dark and saying, where is that flame? That's what it is to carry the light of truth and the light of love in this dark world, to hold it aloft. So we delight in the company of the virtuous, and we seek it out. We need that company. And it's an antidote to often the company that is imposed upon us by the news and newspapers, television, radio, the internet, everything. We're being bombarded by the company of the unvirtuous. We're being bombarded by the toxic company that fills the news. So we really have to dampen that down. We say, no, I'm not going to keep the company of that. I need to know enough to stay informed so that I can be empowered to act and be effective in the world. But I don't have to keep the company of that all the time. Not how it comes to me through the media, nor by perseverating on it in my mind. We say, no, I'm not going to keep the company of that. That doesn't empower me. What's going to empower me to transform my own state, the state of others, to support that as they do their work, and the state of the world? That's what we do. And then he ends with saying, and you practice indifference towards the wicked. So yes, we see all the painful, horrible things that people are doing, from the top leaders of the world down to people in everyday life carrying on violence against others. So the attitude of indifference that he's talking about is really what's called dispassion. It means we don't take it in and get reactive. We see it for what it is. We see the ignorance that's driving it. We see that the suffering that person who's flailing about and creating suffering for others is in this state of toxic, painful ignorance. And so we step away from that. We don't keep perseverating. How can that be? What are they doing? Oh, that stuff, that goes with a mind that isn't wise. We want to stay with our wise mind. Our wise mind sees it and says, yes, this is what's going on. Many things have to change in this world. What am I empowered to do here and now? I'm empowered to take care of my state and to share that as best I can with all those around me, to bring love and compassion into the sphere of my life, my relationships, my work. So the indifference, the dispassion towards the wicked doesn't mean we ignore them and hope they go away. No, we do things that are empowered. We do things to empower ourselves politically and take political action. We do things that are empowered, and we take economic action. We boycott. We refuse to go along with this, that, and other things. We resist in different ways. But we're doing it with a quality of mind that is dispassionate. Dispassionate meaning it's not just reactive. It's not the angry, reactive mind. That's not a powerful mind. That's a mind, and we know this neurophysiologically. If we're in a state of anger or distress, then literally that part of the brain starts to occlude the frontal lobes, where a higher order thinking, where our most effective executive functions lie. And so if we're angry and upset, we do things that are less effective, less clear, less productive, and can be actually counterproductive. So we want, again, whether we're just an individual or a yogi, we want to keep that balanced, steady state, because if we truly want to change our own state of mind and body and the state of the world, we have to be in our best state. So we're pursuing that highest state for the benefit of ourself and the benefit of all beings. So we can walk that wisdom into the world. We can show that there are ways where we can all flourish together, that it doesn't work for a few to flourish and have billions and billions, while billions and billions of people don't have enough. That's a system that's got to be overturned. And to do that, we have to be empowered, clear, productive, effective. We do that first by becoming deeply grounded in our best state, and then communicating that more and more effectively, seeing how the highest truths and the highest ways of being can be integrated into everyday life, into relationships, into commerce. That it doesn't have to be a system that's built just on, some get to dominate and exploit, and everybody else is scrambling to survive. That's not the state that we want to see the world in, or a way of having governments reflect our highest state. They're reflecting the lowest state of people caught in that ignorance and bondage, flailing about and creating suffering for more and more people and all beings on this planet. So our effectiveness, our empowerment to be able to change that and to work in all the domains that we need to be able to do that comes from being able to be rooted in a steady state. Be able to see clearly and see where can we be effective and apply our consciousness, apply our energy to act and do things in the world from that place of steadiness, from that place of equanimity, from that place of wisdom, from that place of all-embracing loving kindness. This is a monumental task. So that's why it's not for the faint-hearted. That's why it's not the most popular thing to do in this world. People will want to avoid that, and so they'd rather be able to hide from what's going on in a momentary pleasure, a distraction. And that actually serves those who continue to abuse people from positions of power. The great Stoic, Marcus Aurelius, centuries ago, wrote about, he called it bread and circus. And he said, as long as the people have enough bread and circus back then in ancient Greece and Rome, the entertainment was, the Colosseum, the circuses. So if you keep people well enough fed and keep them distracted with entertainment, the rulers could do anything. Well, we still see that. We see that people still will want to escape into, I can just have enough for myself and I can be entertained and I hope those other things don't encroach upon my life too much. That's not the way of a yogi. That's not the way of a seeker. That's not the way of a mystic. That's not the way of sages and saints across all traditions. We cannot allow that impulse. We understand that's an impulse of the fear-driven mind. And we just say, oh, that's what that is. I would like to be able to hide from this. But that's not becoming more conscious. That's not expanding our consciousness. That's not embracing the world and all its suffering and being present and walking a different state into the world, a state of loving kindness, compassion, a state of wisdom that cuts through all that kind of nonsense. That's what we're called on to do in this age of darkness called Kali Yuga, where dharma, that living in accord with the highest reality, the truth of the divine everywhere, well, it's at its lowest ebb. And so each one of us has to be a carrier of dharma in our lives, a carrier of that light of wisdom. And so we come back to these foundational practices that empower us in these ways. That's why he was talking about, concentration. Well, concentration, what is that doing? It's training the mind. What breaks concentration? Oh, an emotion, an impulse, a thought, a feeling, a memory, a reflection. All these things distract the mind. So when we're sitting in meditation and saying, no, for this period of time, I'm inviting my awareness to just stay present with the inner sound of mantra, the sacred sound resounding within. I'm going to stay steady with the flow of the breath. Then, moment by moment, we're letting go of the distraction to come back to this object of focus that is the divine. Then we're distracted by a thought, a feeling, a memory, or whatever. No, we just let it go. So the way the mind lets go is shifting attention. That's what it means for the mind to let go. Let go of what distracts, come back to what you're revering, what you're keeping company with in the moment. Meditation is an invitation to be in the company, the full embrace of the divine, within, without, everywhere. We want to break that concentration? We want to run away from the company of the infinite to keep the company of some distorted, toxic little thought, memory, reflection? No, we don't want to do that. So we bring that intention to stay present with this glorious, exalted presence of the living presence of the divine. That's meditation. That's training the mind from a place of this loving compassion, this wisdom that's then reflected in our practice. It's not a stick. We don't bring a stick to meditation. We remind ourselves over and over again. This is an invitation. So I wanted to share this. This is from another volume. This is from Oh My Beloved. And think of this is how we can approach meditation. This is a poem called If We Linger, Remembering. If we linger, remembering, savoring, remembering, savoring the reminder, a sound perhaps, or two, Om, So, Hum, these will do, or Lala, Kabir, Hafiz, Mirabai. Is not the one delighting equally in the forgetting, the reminder, and the remembering is not the one, your own sublime, divine self, present here and now. That one delights equally in forgetting, in the form of the reminder, the throb of the infinite that it has created, mantra, prayer, stillness, silence, spaciousness, the reminder, delighting equally in the forgetting, the reminder, the remembering, the embrace, the embrace. This is what we long for. It's always the divine embrace. That's what comes of remembering. The embrace is always here. You're always in the divine embrace. We forget. We forget. We forget by being identified with this limited mind, this limited body, this limited life, all the limited samskaras from past lives and whatever. That's the forgetting. The reminders are the gifts of grace that come along. Well, it might be a sunset, might be a bird, might be a word from a loved one, might be a mantra. So we make use of mantra because it's always available. We can carry that reminder around with us at all times, in all places. Come back to mantra, come back to breath, come back home to who you truly are. This is what it's all about. Then walking that into the world. We look around, all you see is the product of forgetting. We live in a world where all the suffering is born of the ignorance, the forgetting that this is the divine. And we can live that fully into the world. Treat each other. You're the embodiment of the divine. You are the divine. Oh, so is this environment. So are these creatures. Creature, creation, creator, all one. Mantra, repeater of mantra, source of mantra, all one. That's what we're doing. We're moving beyond the mind that has divided these things up and made them seem like they're separate and different, and forgetting the unity that makes it all so sublime. So we come home to that. So we linger in that. It's meditation. Meditation. I'm going to linger a while with the beloved. Oh, my beloved. We want that for all beings, to know that, to know how it's not even. We talk about a veil. The veil isn't true. There is no veil. The veil is a creation of the mind. There's no veil other than the mind saying there's a veil. Other than the mind saying I'm separate and I'm different. That's the veil. It's that flimsy. It's that empty. So we set aside the veil. And it's just a thought. It's a thought that then creates the reality, the painful reality of separation, of want, of need, of desperation. All because we bought into that deluded thought. I am separate. I am not one. I am not the infinite. And nothing more painful than that. So we make use of the practices that take us home that cut through that. That empowers to dive under those waves of the world that keep crashing. We just dive through them and under, dive through them and under. See what they are. They're all born of delusion. They're manifestations of delusion. They're going to keep standing for dharma, standing for truth, standing for the love that embraces all, that wants all to flourish together. So for that reason, we come together in satsang to know that truth, to be empowered to live that into the world. And so one of the empowered practices we're given is mantra. So we're going to be chanting ancient mantra, Om Kalima, Kali Namo Nama, a slow, quiet chant. And then afterwards we'll repeat the mantra in silence. And just as Patanjali was talking about how our breath under duress becomes disturbed, chanting smooths and deepens the breath. Silently repeating Om Kalima once on the inhalation, Om Kalima slowly once on the exhalation, slows and deepens the breath. So we have this natural pranayama going on that calms the mind, brain, body system, so that we are more able to distance ourselves from it. Not because the infinite is contingent upon the state of mind or body. It's our awareness that keeps being captured by fluctuations of mind and body that we call thoughts, feelings, emotions, sensories, sensations, dreams, everything. They distract us. So we calm them down, become absorbed in the vehicle of mantra, and enter the spaciousness of being, so boundless that even if the mind acts, it's no more than a speck in a corner of the universe. That's what we come to know. So we'll be chanting Om Kalima, Kali Namo Nama for a few minutes, and then just sit in that stillness. And as we sit in that stillness, in that silence, just keep repeating silently, Om Kalima, Om Kalima, Om Kalima. Shri Matakali Devi Ki Jaya. Om Kali Ma Kali Namo Namah. 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 Om Kali Ma Kali Namo Resting in the divine embrace, lingering, remembering. Aham. I am the divine. All is the divine. Om Kalima. Om Kalima. Om Kalima. So we end with this prayer, and may all our practices truly benefit everyone, and may all beings know complete freedom from suffering. Namaste. And we take refuge in the practices, take refuge in mantra. Om Mata Kali. Take refuge in the Divine Mother. Om Mother Mary. Om Dharma. We take refuge in that feminine face of the infinite. One that leaps forward to free us from suffering. The face of love, compassion, kindness, embracing all, the face of our own self. Keep coming home to that. Make use of the practices, make use of mantra throughout the day, that we may linger, remembering the truth. It's only the truth that can set us free from suffering. Now, come home to that. And then we walk that greater freedom, that greater capacity to be loving, kind, compassionate, patient, understanding, generous. Because of the fullness, the infinite fullness of these that are our being. And they're uncaused. That's why it's so different from the mind. The mind says, I'm happy because. This isn't that happiness. Isn't that joy? It's the boundless, rapturous, loving joy of simply being. Uncaused. That's why it exists in the face of all the pains and sorrows that afflict mind and body, our own as well as others. So when we turn to this ocean, this boundlessness, this luminous field that is loving, compassionate, all-embracing, unaffected by the vagaries of the world, by conditions of mind or body. It never abandons us. It embraces all, embraces us in our worst states, and is reflected in our most exalted states of mind. Come home to that, know that, dissolve in that, live it into the world for the benefit of all. So I'm going to thank you for being ones doing this sacred work, the hardest work. So it's called the hero's journey. It's the hardest work. To leave behind the mind, our own and others, to know the truth, to know the infinitude, to know and live in that light. So thank you for being ones doing that and walking it into your everyday lives. And thank you for coming this evening, bringing your divine presence. Thank you for the many ways you support Anamkara, through donations, through participating in our programs, taking the courses. So thank you. And thank you for sharing what we offer with others so that we can just make it as freely available as possible. So thank you. And once again, with all my heart, thank you for coming this evening. And I look forward to seeing you again in our next program.